When you're young, love feels free. You fall first and think later. But somewhere between heartbreaks, responsibilities, and reality, love stops being poetry and starts feeling like a deal. Suddenly, it's not I choose you, it's what do you bring to the table? So, what changed? Did love fail us, or did life train us to protect ourselves? Let's talk about why love becomes transactional as we get older. Love starts emotional because in the beginning we are driven by feeling rather than foresight. When we fall for someone early in life, love feels instinctive, almost biological. There is excitement, curiosity, desire, and the illusion that emotion alone is enough to sustain a connection. We don't ask where this is going or how it will survive pressure. We are present focused, intoxicated by how someone makes us feel in the moment. Love at this stage is expressive and idealistic. It believes that if the feeling is strong, everything else will somehow work itself out. Emotion leads, logic follows far behind, and consequences feel distant or irrelevant. As time passes, emotion alone begins to prove insufficient. Reality starts interrupting romance. Responsibilities increase, expectations sharpen, and life introduces variables that passion cannot solve. Bills must be paid, boundaries must be respected, communication must be consistent, and effort must be sustainable. Emotional attraction doesn't disappear, but it gets tested. People realize that love is not just about how deeply you feel, but how reliably you show up. Slowly, love becomes less about intensity and more about dependability. What once felt magical is now measured against practicality, and the shift is subtle but irreversible. Experience also reshapes how love is approached. After disappointment, heartbreak, or betrayal, emotion no longer feels safe on its own. People learn that feelings can be misleading, temporary, or one sided. Emotional highs are often followed by emotional crashes, and the cost of those crashes becomes heavier with age, so the heart adapts. It begins to ask quieter, more cautious questions. Can this person be trusted? Are their words aligned with their actions? Will this relationship add stability or chaos to my life? Love becomes filtered through reason, not because emotion is gone, but because unfiltered emotion has proven dangerous before. With maturity, priorities change. Time becomes valuable, energy becomes limited, and tolerance for uncertainty decreases. Love is no longer pursued for the thrill of feeling chosen. It is pursued for the security of being understood. Emotional connection is still desired, but it must coexist with compatibility, shared values, and long-term vision. Practical considerations enter the picture naturally. Lifestyle alignment, emotional regulation, and mutual effort become essential. Romance doesn't disappear, but it is no longer allowed to override reality. This transition often gets misunderstood as becoming cold or calculating, but it is neither. It is a response to accumulated experience. Love becomes practical because survival demands it. People are no longer just protecting their hearts, they are protecting their peace, their future, and their sense of self. Emotion still initiates love, but practicality decides whether it stays. The older someone gets, the more they understand that love is not proven by promises or passion, but by consistency, accountability, and the ability to endure real life together. Past wounds create silent contracts because pain teaches people to protect themselves in ways they rarely verbalize. After being hurt, most individuals don't announce their fears or outline their emotional boundaries out loud. Instead, they internalize rules based on what once broke them. These rules operate quietly beneath the surface, shaping how they give, receive, and withhold love. What looks like distance, hesitation, or emotional control is often an unspoken agreement someone has made with themselves. Never again at any cost. Love may still be desired, but it is now approached with caution, shaped by memory rather than hope. Every emotional wound leaves behind a lesson, and those lessons become conditions. Someone who was abandoned may unconsciously decide they will never fully rely on another person again. Someone who was betrayed may resolve to always keep a portion of their heart guarded. These contracts are not deliberate strategies. They are survival responses. They dictate how much effort feels safe, how vulnerable feels tolerable, and how close is too close. The person may still say they want intimacy, but their behavior negotiates terms that keep pain at a distance. Silent contracts also redefine expectations. Love becomes conditional without anyone explicitly stating the conditions. Affection is given cautiously, trust is earned slowly, and commitment is delayed until reassurance feels sufficient. People begin to exchange emotional access for consistency, loyalty for predictability, openness for proof. These trades are rarely discussed because acknowledging them would mean confronting the fear underneath. So instead, they remain unspoken, quietly influencing decisions and reactions in relationships. Over time, these silent agreements can create emotional misunderstandings. One person may believe they are being patient and respectful, while the other feels unseen or restricted. The issue is not lack of love, but the presence of unhealed pain shaping the terms of connection. When two people bring different contracts into a relationship, conflict arises not from what is said, but from what is assumed. One expects reassurance, the other expects independence. One wants closeness, the other prioritizes control. These contracts often go unnoticed, even by the people who carry them. They feel like common sense, like wisdom gained through experience, yet they are often driven more by fear than by clarity. Past wounds convince people that if they can control the terms of love, they can control the outcome. But love resists control. The more conditions placed on it, the less natural it becomes. Emotional safety achieved through restriction often comes at the cost of depth, spontaneity, and true intimacy. As life progresses, these silent contracts harden unless they are examined. They become default settings rather than conscious choices. Love continues, but it is filtered, negotiated, and managed. People don't stop loving, they stop risking. The desire for connection remains, but it exists alongside an equally strong desire to avoid pain. And in that space between longing and fear, relationships are shaped not by present reality, but by echoes of past hurt. Time becomes more valuable than feelings when experience teaches people how limited both energy and opportunity truly are. In earlier stages of life, time feels abundant and endlessly renewable. Emotional experiences are chased freely, even if they lead nowhere, because there is always the belief that there will be another chance, another relationship, another version of love waiting ahead. Feelings dominate decisions because the cost of wasting time does not yet feel real. People invest months or years into situations driven purely by emotion, trusting that intensity alone justifies the investment. As responsibilities increase and life becomes more structured, time begins to reveal its weight. Careers demand focus, families require presence, and personal goals compete for attention. Emotional uncertainty starts to feel expensive. Waiting for someone to decide, hoping for consistency, or navigating mixed signals becomes exhausting rather than romantic. The question shifts from how someone makes you feel to how they fit into the life you are building. Feelings are still important, but they are no longer allowed to monopolize time without purpose or direction. With age, people become acutely aware that time spent in the wrong relationship is time taken away from growth, stability, and peace. Emotional highs lose their appeal when they are followed by prolonged confusion or emotional labor. The tolerance for ambiguity decreases. People begin to value clarity over chemistry and intention over intensity. Love is no longer measured by how deeply it stirs emotion, but by how efficiently it integrates into a meaningful life. Time becomes a currency that cannot be wasted on uncertainty. This shift is not about becoming emotionally detached, it is about becoming selective. When time is recognized as finite, emotional investment becomes intentional. People start asking whether a connection is progressing or merely consuming time. They evaluate whether effort is mutual, whether communication is consistent, and whether the relationship has direction. Feelings without forward movement begin to feel hollow. Emotional attachment that lacks structure or commitment is seen not as romantic, but as draining. As people mature, they also learn that feelings are unpredictable. They can change, fade, or intensify without warning. Time, however, moves in one direction. This understanding makes people cautious about letting emotions dictate long term decisions. They prefer relationships that respect their time, honor their boundaries, and contribute to their stability. Love becomes less about emotional escape and more about emotional alignment. Ultimately, valuing time over feelings is a form of self respect developed through experience. It reflects an understanding that emotional connection should enhance life, not delay it. People begin to prioritize relationships that move with them rather than stall them. The heart still desires closeness, but it no longer sacrifices years waiting for potential to become reality. Time becomes the measure through which love is evaluated, shaping choices that favor longevity, consistency, and purpose over fleeting emotional intensity. Security replaces butterflies when experience teaches people that excitement is not the same as safety. In the beginning, butterflies feel like proof of love. The nervous anticipation, the racing heart, the emotional highs and lows are interpreted as passion and depth. That intensity feels intoxicating, especially when love is new and unfamiliar. The unpredictability itself becomes part of the attraction. People chase the feeling because it makes them feel alive, chosen, and emotionally stimulated, even if it comes with anxiety and uncertainty. Over time, those butterflies begin to feel different. What once felt thrilling starts to feel unstable. The same nervousness that was mistaken for passion reveals itself as inconsistency, emotional unpredictability, or fear of loss. People begin to notice that constant emotional stimulation often comes from not knowing where they stand. The excitement is fueled by uncertainty, not connection. As awareness grows, the appeal of emotional chaos fades. What replaces it is a desire for calm, reassurance, and emotional steadiness. Security offers something butterflies never could: peace. It shows up as consistency in words and actions, emotional availability without games, and the absence of anxiety. Security allows people to relax into love rather than perform for it. There is no need to guess, chase, or overthink. The nervous energy that once defined attraction is replaced by comfort and trust. This shift often feels unfamiliar at first, even boring to those accustomed to emotional intensity, but it gradually reveals its depth. As people mature, they begin to understand that love should not feel like survival. Constant highs and lows exhaust the nervous system and erode emotional well being. Security creates space for vulnerability without fear. It allows partners to be imperfect without threatening the relationship. Love becomes a place of restoration rather than tension. The absence of butterflies does not mean the absence of desire. It means the presence of safety. This transition also reflects emotional healing. When wounds from past relationships are addressed, the need for intensity decreases. Butterflies often thrive in environments where validation is uncertain. Security thrives where self-worth is stable. As self awareness grows, people stop equating anxiety with attraction. They learn that calm does not mean indifferent, and predictability does not mean passionless. It means reliable connection. Security ultimately becomes the foundation upon which lasting love is built. It supports growth, intimacy, and resilience. Instead of craving emotional spikes, people value emotional steadiness. Love becomes less about how intensely the heart races and more about how peacefully it rests. The excitement transforms into something quieter but deeper, rooted in trust, mutual respect, and the assurance that the connection is not fragile, temporary, or conditional. Fear of loss turns love into negotiation when the desire to protect what remains becomes stronger than the willingness to risk vulnerability. After experiencing loss, people stop entering relationships with open hands. They arrive cautious, measuring how much to give and how much to hold back. Love is no longer offered freely, it is managed carefully. Every emotional investment is weighed against the possibility of disappointment. What once flowed naturally now requires internal calculation because losing again feels more threatening than loving fully. This fear reshapes behavior in subtle ways. People begin to bargain emotionally, even if they never articulate it. They offer affection in exchange for reassurance, loyalty in exchange for stability, and vulnerability in exchange for consistency. These exchanges are rarely conscious or malicious. They emerge from a deep need to prevent pain. Love becomes less about connection and more about control. Negotiation feels safer than surrender because control creates the illusion of protection. As fear of loss grows, people also become hyper aware of power dynamics. They monitor who cares more, who reaches out first, who compromises more. Emotional balance becomes a strategic concern rather than a natural rhythm. When someone fears losing the relationship, they may withhold parts of themselves to maintain leverage or avoid appearing too invested. Love shifts from mutual expression to emotional chess, where each move is designed to minimize risk. This negotiation often disguises itself as maturity or standards. People tell themselves they are being smart, selective, or self respecting. While boundaries are healthy, fear driven conditions are different. They stem from anxiety rather than clarity. Love becomes conditional not because values are defined, but because safety is prioritized above intimacy. The relationship functions, but it lacks emotional freedom. Every interaction carries an undercurrent of self protection. Over time, negotiation erodes spontaneity and trust. Partners may sense that affection is being rationed, that closeness must be earned repeatedly, and that vulnerability comes with invisible terms. This creates emotional distance even in committed relationships. Love becomes a series of transactions rather than a shared experience. The more fear dictates behavior, the less room there is for genuine connection. Fear of loss also narrows emotional expression. People avoid difficult conversations, suppress needs, or overcompensate to keep the relationship intact. They negotiate away authenticity in exchange for security. But what is preserved is not love itself, only the structure of the relationship. Without honesty and emotional risk, love becomes a contract rather than a bond. The relationship survives, but it does not deepen. When love is governed by fear, every moment becomes a test of stability. People focus on maintaining what they have rather than growing together. The relationship becomes fragile in a different way, dependent on constant reassurance and emotional bargaining. Fear convinces people that if they negotiate carefully enough, they can avoid loss. But in doing so, they slowly replace intimacy with strategy and connection with control. Transactional love isn't evil because it doesn't come from cruelty, selfishness, or a lack of capacity to care. It comes from wounds that were never given the space to heal. People do not wake up one day and decide to reduce love to exchanges and conditions. They arrive there slowly, shaped by experiences where giving freely led to loss, disappointment, or emotional exhaustion. Transactional behavior in relationships is often a defensive adaptation, a way to continue connecting without exposing old injuries to further harm. Unhealed love operates from memory rather than presence. When someone has been repeatedly hurt, their nervous system learns to associate vulnerability with danger. As a result, love becomes structured around safety rather than openness. Affection is offered carefully, trust is extended gradually, and emotional availability is tied to guarantees. These patterns are not expressions of malice, they are expressions of fear. Transactional love is the mind's attempt to create predictability in an emotional world that once felt chaotic and painful. This form of love often carries a sense of fairness and balance. People want to ensure that effort is matched, that commitment is reciprocated, and that emotional labor is shared. On the surface, this seems reasonable. The problem arises when these expectations are driven by unresolved pain rather than healthy boundaries. When love is given with a mental ledger, intimacy becomes conditional. Emotional closeness is permitted only when certain criteria are met, and connection becomes something that must be earned repeatedly. Transactional love also reflects a deep longing for control. After experiencing emotional powerlessness, people seek to regain agency by defining terms. They believe that if they can regulate how much they give and receive, they can prevent future hurt. But love resists strict structure. It thrives in authenticity, not calculation. When every interaction is weighed for fairness, the relationship loses its emotional fluidity. Partners may feel evaluated rather than accepted, valued for what they provide rather than who they are. Despite its limitations, transactional love is not the opposite of care. It is a transitional state between hurt and healing. It allows people to stay connected while minimizing perceived risk. For many, it is the only way they know how to love without reopening old wounds. This does not make them cold or incapable of depth, it makes them cautious. Their desire for love remains intact, but it is filtered through protective mechanisms that were never dismantled. Healing shifts love from transaction to trust. When past pain is acknowledged and processed, the need to negotiate intimacy decreases. People begin to feel safe enough to give without constant monitoring and receive without suspicion. Love stops being a strategy and becomes an experience again. Until that healing occurs, transactional love serves as a bridge, imperfect but necessary, between emotional survival and genuine connection. Love doesn't become practical, guarded, or transactional because people lose their capacity to feel. It changes because people remember what it cost them to feel without protection. Every shift from emotion to practicality, from butterflies to security, from openness to negotiation, is not a betrayal of love, but a reflection of experience. What we often label as coldness is usually wisdom mixed with unresolved pain. Beneath the calculations, the conditions, and the silent contracts is still the same human desire to be seen, chosen, and safe. The real work, then, is not to shame ourselves or others for how love evolves, but to understand what shaped it. When love is driven by fear, it shrinks into transactions. When it is driven by awareness and healing, it expands into trust. Maturity is not about loving less or demanding more. It is about learning when protection is necessary and when it has outlived its purpose. As wounds heal, love no longer needs to negotiate its worth or guard its presence. It becomes intentional, grounded, and free enough to choose connection not out of fear of loss, but out of clarity and emotional wholeness.